Good morning, everybody. It's Amanda getting ready to do our first of 4 hours of Xero content this morning. For those of you who don't know, I'm a CPA with a practice in New Orleans, but I also have this little side project, which is to train accountants and bookkeepers on technology. So as I mentioned, this is Xero Beyond Basics Part 1. We have 4 hours of content. We do separate these into distinct sections of content because there are people who sign up for 1 or 2 of them and not all 4 of them. So because of that, these are 4 different webinar logins. So today we're covering strategic setup. So our objectives are really around settings and setup. So this is how to manage a Xero file, or as Xero calls them, organizations. It's a lot of back-end stuff. We aren't going to do any accounting today, really. In this 1 hour, we are going to look at just how to set up the file correctly. As you guys know, that saves us a lot of headache down the road. So we'll create a file and really put a lot of data into it from scratch. So here are our learning objectives. They were all on the original promotion, so hopefully you guys are following this. I don't want to read to you, but these are the things we're going to cover this morning. This strategic setup slide I use to set, I guess, the purpose of why we spend time talking about setup and why it's important. The first reason that we focus on setup from a strategic perspective is that we want to plot the right roadmap for our clients. So when we are creating a Xero file or Xero organization, we want to be thoughtful about the way we structure the system. If we give it some thought and really think about the way that we create the settings or set up settings, especially setting up the correct chart of accounts, that is plotting the right roadmap for our clients. As you guys know, there's a lot of talk about advisory and giving clients decision-making metrics or indicators, but we can't get to that point unless the accounting file is set up in the right way. So I don't know about you guys, but I've had situations where I have gotten new clients usually who have maybe several years of history behind them, and I wish that their prior accountant or bookkeeper would have set things up differently so that I could have that good history and be able to slice and dice it the way I really wanted, instead of just throwing everything in one sales account, for instance. So what we want to do is when we take on these new clients, we want to be very deliberate about the way that we structure their Xero file. The second thing is we want to automate as much as possible. So in setup, again, we want to think about, are there other add-ons that we're going to be plugging into Xero? So we often think at our firm about Xero as being the center of the ecosystem, and there are a lot of possibilities of other apps that can plug in. So we can have payroll apps like Gusto or OnPay. We can have bill payment apps like Bill.com or Routable. We can have some dashboarding apps that actually aren't sending data to Xero, but rather pulling data out of Xero. So all of these apps, or most of these apps, serve a purpose of automating a function of the accounting process, and we want to make sure that when we're setting up the data file in Xero, that we're thinking ahead to what may need to be automated, and again, creating the right system to plug in and create a beneficial ecosystem with automation. And the third thing is to dummy proof it. So I always want to make sure that I have locked down what needs to be locked down from my clients in the files. Unless they're especially sophisticated, I don't want to give them too many options, too many ways to make mistakes. So part of the setup is saving our clients from themselves. So let's go over into Xero and we'll give you a little layout. So I did notice that some of you guys are already using Xero. Just a show of hands, had any of you used Xero before the new navigation that came out about a year ago? Is anybody familiar with the old navigation bar at the top? There was like an advisor tab. No? Okay, good. Okay, well, Xero changed their navigation about a year ago in an effort to simplify it. And I think it probably has simplified it to some degree. But some things that used to be very clear about where to find, like settings, have been moved around. So I'm going to give you a little layout of the Xero dashboard and how I have learned to find what I need as fast as possible. So going from the top left, this is our company name, Island Escape. It's going to be our pool services company we're going to work with for the next 4 hours. This is actually a pull down, and if you have other clients, this is the fastest way to toggle. So we would change the organization here and be able to toggle between different companies. Underneath the org, I call it org because Xero calls their files organizations or orgs. Under the org name, there are two things really that we're going to work with in a regular daily capacity. The stuff down here really has to do with sort of more advanced practice management type tools like Workflow Max, which is also known as Xero Practice Manager, projects. But for today and for the scope of this couple of hours of work, we're really just going to focus on these top two, files and settings. So files is it's like a file library that has a dedicated email address where we can send in documents that Xero is going to either hold for us or attach to transactions. So it's a little file inbox, and we can actually drag and drop files into here. We can upload them or we can send them to this email address. And then there's settings, and that's where we're going to start our day. So settings has not all of the settings that used to be in the settings tab, but only some of the settings. I think about settings here as being more general features like the demographics of the company, adding users, and then also getting money from our clients. And I'll explain that a little bit further in the session today. And then across the top, dashboard is going to be generally where we land when we enter a client. So our dashboard has tiles on the left and the right. Tiles on the left are bank accounts or credit card accounts, a tile for each. This is a completely empty org. I just created it this morning for this webinar series. We're going to put some stuff in here, but there's nothing there yet. But you would see a tile or a card for each of your bank or credit card accounts. And then over on the right, these tiles have to do with accounts payable and accounts receivable. So there's a tile for each of those. If you wanted to edit the dashboard, meaning to add, maybe show tiles that were hidden or rearrange tiles or hide tiles, you can just click this edit dashboard link at the bottom and you'll see how to do that. I will point out that everything in Xero that is light blue is something you can click on. So it could be a drill down, it could be a header that's a sorting header, but anything in Xero that's blue is something you can click on. Working across the top, you have two main tabs, business and accounting. Business tab to me is the stuff that we need to do regularly to collect and to pay money. So this is likely where our business owners are operating most of the time. They're creating invoices and they're asking clients for money or they're paying bills. On the accounting tab, these are the things that we are either done by accountants or done by the client occasionally. So bank accounts lives here. So if you think about doing a bank reconciliation, coding transactions, maybe there's something that gets done every day, but if your clients are anything like mine, that's not that often. So they're only getting in bank accounts occasionally. Reports as well would be occasional. And then there's this advanced button that's going to bring us over to the other half of settings. So half of settings lives under the org name, and half of what I think of as settings lives here in the advanced accounting tab. And we'll go through that in a second. And then contacts is just our contacts. It's very simple. Plus would be to create something new. So it's a quick menu button to create a new spend or receive money, a new invoice or bill, and some other things. Global search will help us find transactions or invoices or bills very quickly from the top menu. This is our notifications tab, which tells us like if we fail to upload a document for some reason or the bank feed needs to be refreshed. This help is actually quite helpful. There is Xero Support, or Xero Central, has a really deep database of help topics. It's probably the best that I've seen for a cloud-based package. It's really good. You can, depending on where you are in Xero, this help menu will change. It's dynamic for where you are. Or you can also just go straight to support at Xero Central and do a search for whatever you're looking for. If you need to contact Xero Support and send in a support ticket, you have to do it from here. Contact Xero Support will generate a ticket through their system. Any questions so far? All right, let's get into settings. So we're going to start over in our basic demographic stuff, which is just the org and then the settings tab, and we're going to go into our organizational details. So this has very basic data about the company. So I came in this morning and I created the company name, and apologies, I label it for the month that we're doing the session in, because I tend to have a bunch of these after a couple of months. So not to confuse them, I put this in brackets. But display name and legal trading name. Display name would be what Xero calls it, and legal trading name would be the legal name. You can add a logo if you like. We could put our type of business here. We can put any of these fields that we think we want in a system. I would encourage you always to put the postal address. So I'm going to use our old office address, which is Harrison Avenue, New Orleans. And this is the quick find. Oops. This is the quick find tab that goes out to Google and finds the address. And that's important because in the Xero Advisor directory, you may have noticed before that it's geotagged. The advisor directory is geotagged, so that if a new business or new client comes on and looks for a Xero advisor, they're going to put where they're located, and then the search results are going to give back to them advisors in the area of their business. The way that those advisors are determined is by their underlying client business addresses. It's not by the address of the firm. Does that make sense? So for our practice, we're in New Orleans, but we have clients in Florida and Georgia and California. So when you get to a certain number, and I don't know what the number is, but you can get to a certain critical mass of businesses in those areas, you'll start to come up in those searches. So this is really important, and you have to do it through this quick find. Down at the bottom, you'll also see some other fields, email and website. If you want these fields to be populated on your clients' reports or invoices, this is where you would put them. Okay, let's go back up into the same place, settings. We're going to look at email settings. So your clients are going to be likely going to be sending invoices and emails, email reminders directly out of Xero, or Xero is going to be doing that for them. Here's where we manage the back-end email settings that are going out to our clients. So the email address is going to default to the user that's logged in. But if you want, you can change that default. So maybe you want to add a billing at or receivables at the client as an email address. You can do that here. And then email templates. These are the templates for the body of the emails that we are sending. You can see Xero gives you defaults for these basic kinds of emails, but we can edit them. So let's go edit the sales invoice, which would be the one we would likely use most. In the body of the email, you'll see there are brackets that indicate fields. So these fields are going to change based on whatever the invoice details are. So this email is going to say invoice number, whatever, from us to the client. A couple of things that I always go in and change on this for new clients is, for some reason, Xero's default shows that it's currency code with an invoice total. So because Xero is global, there are lots of currency codes that Xero deals in. So if we were to send this out from the US, it would say, here's invoice number 634 for USD, US dollar, and a dollar amount without a dollar sign. So I always go in and get rid of this and insert placeholders where we'd find the fields that we can add. I had to put in the currency symbol, and actually an extra space needs to go in here too. Okay, so I'd do that in these two places. Delete that. Insert currency symbol, because that would look a lot better. And then you can change the body of this if you want. This will be your default, and it's going to go out and be used. So that's where that can be changed. Let's go over to the settings that are under accounting and advanced. So we're going to look at financial settings. So this is like the really important accounting stuff. This is where we put in our financial year end. The default in the US is December 31. We can change that. We can indicate our sales tax basis and accrual period. So if our sales tax is cash basis, we want to indicate that here. And then I also want to tell Xero how often I'm remitting my sales tax. So it could be every month, every quarter, every year. Tax defaults. This is for sales tax. This is kind of a weird one, and I sort of underestimated the importance of these settings until I had a client screw it up. So the tax defaults, these are sales tax defaults for sales, so money coming in, and purchases, money going out. Xero is a global company. There are a lot of countries in the world that collect sales tax in different ways than the US. There's GST, there's VAT. So Xero gives us in this panel a way to adjust it and to make it correct for wherever we are collecting or remitting taxes. In the US, our sales are tax exclusive. And what that means is that the sales price does not include any sales tax, and sales tax should be added on top of the price. If you guys are familiar with Europe, that's not how it works in Europe. When you pay a purchase price for items in Europe, it's inclusive of sales or VAT tax. In the US, we throw tax on top of it, which really confuses people from other countries. But that's the way we do it. So tax exclusive for sales. Purchases, no tax. This doesn't mean that we don't pay tax on purchases. It just means that the sales tax we do pay on a purchase is part of the expense. It's not going to be carved out and sent to a liability account. It's not going to be carved out to offset sales that are sales tax collected. It is just part of the expense. So if I purchase a case of copy paper for $50, and in New Orleans, sales tax is almost 10%, so I'm going to pay $55 for it. I'm not going to say, well, my office supplies are $50 and sales tax is $5. I'm just going to have office supplies of $55. The reason I discovered the importance of this is because I had a client that came in and changed it. And so what he did was he figured out a way to have the $5 that's separate on sales tax show up on the bills. So we'll look at bills in the session in the next hour. But if you look at a Xero bill that has sales tax applied, or an invoice that has sales tax applied, you would notice there's the body, and then down at the bottom under the total or subtotal, there would be tax applied. So what this client had done was to basically impute a sales tax liability backwards so on his purchases. So the way I noticed it was that he had started his Xero file himself, obviously, and I picked it up to review it, and I noticed there was a negative balance in sales tax liability. And when I looked at the detail, it was all these 34 cents, $1.75, like hundreds of negative sales tax liability transactions. And what he had done is he had come here and had it impute sales tax. So that's where that lives. Lock dates, very important. Probably an underused feature in Xero sometimes. We can stop everybody or everybody except advisors from making changes. So in Xero, there are different user permissions. If you have an advisor level permission, which you should have on your clients, this first lock date will close the books and not let transactions post before that date unless the user is an advisor. The second one is stops everybody from making any changes. All right, we're good. Under the same advanced accounting and then advanced screen, there is tracking categories. So if anyone is familiar with QuickBooks Online has classes and they have locations. So this is Xero's, I don't say it's Xero's response because I think Xero did this before. I'm not sure that they did it at all in response to QBO, because in a lot of ways Xero was more sophisticated than QBO in the beginning. But I think of tracking categories as custom fields that can be associated with transactions so that later on we can filter or sort by those fields. So in Xero we have tracking categories can be used for location. They could be used for, I have a nonprofit, we use them for funding sources. So we have different grants set up as tracking categories, and when they spend money, we can know which grant it comes from. I also have a couple of law firms, so sometimes I use tracking categories to indicate the lawyer that either revenue or expense applies to. So you can use tracking categories however you see fit. The only thing I would caution you on is that you only get 2 categories with 100 options underneath. So I'm going to add a tracking category for location for our pool company. So location, and I'm going to give it some of these options. And again, I can have location is the category. The options I can have 100 underneath. So I can get pretty detailed, but it's not like I wouldn't use it for projects or for job costing because 100 is not that many in the whole scheme of things for most clients that would be using job costing. But for us, we're not going to have more than 100 stores. So I'm going to have my Lakeview location, my Mid-City location, and my Uptown location. Okay. So I'm going to save that. And then if I wanted, I could add one more category with 100 options, but that's the limit of it. I will point out that this is included in every Xero file. QBO is now charging people when they get over like 40, I think. Okay, let's talk about sales tax. So back to our advanced accounting, tax rates is what Xero is calling sales tax. So I am going to create a rate for New Orleans. And I'm doing all of these little small setup items right now because as we start to pull data into Xero, we have to have some of this stuff set up before so it'll actually work for us. So let's create tax rate for New Orleans. So I'll create a new sales tax rate. I'm going to call it New Orleans. And New Orleans, like many other places, there are different. If I'm in the city of New Orleans, I'm paying sales tax to a couple different entities. I'm paying one to the parish, which is what a lot of people call, well, I say a lot of people, everybody but Louisiana calls them counties, I think. So here we call them parishes. So Orleans Parish is going to collect 5%. And then also I need to send funds over to the state. So we'll say Louisiana is 4.45. So those 2 components make up my total sales tax rate for New Orleans. It's important to separate the components out because the sales tax reporting in Xero is going to split it up that way because that's the way you have to send it in. You don't send in the whole thing to one place. You need to know how much of each sales tax collection goes to each municipality. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the chart of accounts. So a lot of what we just talked about was just basic setting stuff, but chart of accounts, this is our roadmap for reporting. As advisors, we need to think about what kind of reporting we're going to be needing down the road as our clients grow, and that starts with the chart of accounts. So Xero will give you some default chart of accounts. I never use them, ever. I like to create our own chart of accounts internally for each sort of client we have and use them across the board. So let me show you what one of those files looks like. So here's our chart of accounts file. So it's a CSV file or an Excel file. There are 4 required columns if you're going to do an import of chart of accounts, a code, which the code can be up to 10 characters, numbers or letters, or dashes or decimals. So you can be really flexible if you have clients that have big charts of accounts and they have extensions or subcategories. You can use that convention for these codes, but just be cautious that Xero will let you use any letters or numbers you want. So like I've had clients that their code for the checking account is the word check. The code for office expenses is office. So that's not very helpful. So I always use 4 digits. I'm trying to think, I don't think we have any clients right now that we've set up on 5 digits. I have some that we acquired that had 5-digit codes. But we find that for most of our clients, 4 is good. 3 is not good enough, and Xero sometimes defaults to 3. The second required column would be name, of course. The third required column would be type. So these are types of accounts dictated by Xero in the system. And then the fourth is the tax code. So by default, do you want to impute sales tax on any of these chart of accounts? We almost always do tax exempt. You can change it at the Xero file level or at the chart of accounts level once it's in. So just to make things clean, we generally have them as tax exempt. Description is not required, but it is nice. So we can tell these are required fields for import because they have asterisks next to them, and that's consistent across Xero. If a column heading has an asterisk, it needs to be filled or it won't import. So we are going to close this and we're going to import it into Xero. Okay, so under accounting and, oops, not reports. Accounting and advanced and chart of accounts, we are going to import our chart of accounts. And one thing to pay attention to in Xero is pretty much anywhere that you can import a file, a CSV file, Xero is going to give you a template on the import screen. So here is a sample file. This is global. So pretty much I haven't found one yet. Every import screen has a sample on it or a template on it. So let's browse to our chart of accounts file and we'll go ahead and import it. And it gives us a little summary and I'll say save. And then Xero's going to, anything that we've indicated as a bank account, Xero's going to question us and say, okay, what kind of bank account or account is it really? Bank, credit card, PayPal, or some other current asset. So this is actually a bank checking account. So Xero's just confirming that for us, and we'll go ahead and put in the account number so it can finish the setup of the chart of accounts. Okay, so we have our chart of accounts or our roadmap loaded up. The next step is to deal with conversion balances, and this stresses folks out. It stressed me out actually for a while. When I first started using Xero, I would just kind of put my hands over my ears and pretend like, let somebody else deal with conversion balances. It's not really as difficult as it might seem, and it's incredibly important. So accounting and advanced. And we'll go over to down at the bottom, conversion balances. So the first thing we have to do is pick the date we're going to start using Xero. Really nice if it's the end of a year, fiscal year. Doesn't have to be though. It does have to be the end of a month. So I've had clients who picked a conversion date, like let's say they picked January 2019, and it'll tell you down the bottom as you change the date. Okay, if you pick January 19. Then you need to enter conversion balances for December 31 of 2018. I had a client who had picked a conversion date here, but then was like, well, our conversion date is like September 28th. I'm like, you can't have September 28th as your conversion date. It has to be the end of the month. So Xero is going to create basically a little trial balance for us, a blank trial balance for December 31, 2018, because our conversion date was January 1. So in general, we are going to use the ending trial balance from this date if our client has history. If our client has never had any accounting before, it's great. It can all be zeros. But most of our clients are coming to us with some sort of history. So we, in general, start with the ending trial balance from this period. But there are a couple of exceptions. One, and this is the most important, is that the balance of any account that will be linked via a bank feed or an import into Xero has to be the bank balance, not the general ledger balance. So what Xero calls a bank account, and remember, for Xero, a bank account can also be a PayPal account, it can be a credit card account, anything in Xero that we're labeling as a bank account where we are going to be getting either bank fee transactions in or import transactions in, this starting balance needs to be not the trial balance, but it has to be the bank's version of the balance. And that makes sense because we're going to connect it, you know, like a couple of magnets. We're going to, like, it's going to be like a hose pipe. We're going to connect Xero to our bank. And on January 1, it's going to start feeding transactions in. Well, if that's true, then the ending balance has to be what the bank thinks the ending balance is. So let's say our checking account on the general ledger shows a balance of $2,500, but our bank only has $2,000 on the last day of the year because we had $500 of deposits in transit. Does that make sense? We brought, on the last day of the year, we brought our $500 to the bank and dropped them in on December 31. The bank was closed, so it's not on the bank register yet. It will show up sometime in January. But on our GL, on our trial balance, we were recording it because we dropped it off. So instead of this being $2,500, which is our trial balance value, we need to make it the balance that the bank knows about, which is $2,000. So Amanda, what do we do with the extra $500? We need to create an account called deposits in transit. It can be unpresented checks. It could be whatever you want to call it. I don't happen to like suspense because I think it's too general, but it needs to be some general ledger account that is not connected to a bank feed. So we have one that's connected to a bank feed. The remainder goes to a non-bank feed or bank account. And then what's going to happen is as those transactions are recognized in the bank, so they'll start popping over on the second or so, we'll code them against this line. So when this $500 of deposit increases our bank balance, the offsetting credit is going to be to this deposits in transit, and it will get rid of it. The same would be, or the opposite would be true if it was unpresented checks. We just would put them in here as another GL line and make sure that the coding, when they did come through, it went there. Does that make sense? Another thing I also do in the conversion balances is I put the retained earnings balance. You don't have to do this. Xero will let you save the balances without them tying left and right, debits and credits. But what it does is for any difference between the two columns, it sticks it to an account called historical adjustment. Has anybody seen historical adjustment on a Xero financial? Raise your hand if you have. If you've pulled the balance sheet and been like, where's this historical adjustment coming from? It comes from the screen. So there's generally not a person saying, oh, I'll plug something to historical adjustment. It comes from this conversion balances screen. So I try to do my best to make sure that, you know, when we onboard a client, the debits equal the credits, even if there's something that's, you know, sometimes something we don't know what it is, or we know it's incorrect, then I'll create a line to address it, but I don't want to put historical adjustment. And then once you've got the balances correct, you probably want to click block balances so that nobody can mess with it. Okay, adding inventory items. Is everybody good so far? So Xero has a very basic inventory system. So basic, in fact, that I never use it for anybody who actually needs inventory. What we call their inventory system would be, Xero calls it tracked inventory, where we we indicate that a client is tracking the balance, the stock balance of inventory. And as we buy and sell, Xero will increase and decrease that. But it's like an average cost basis. It's not very flush. So I can think of one client that I actually use that for, who has like incidental inventory. For clients that actually have inventory, we do not use Xero. But we can use untracked inventory for a shortcut for data entry. And let me show you what that looks like. So inventory in Xero, we get their business, and then products and services is what they've renamed inventory. And we don't have anything loaded up. So we're going to load up some things that we buy and sell in our company, but we're going to keep them untracked, meaning we're not going to keep a stock balance on it. We're just going to set it up as a data entry shortcut. So if and this probably happens in your firms, I have an hourly rate as a pool repair person. So I'm going to create a code for AA hourly. This item code here is the shortcut. So this is the thing we're actually going to be typing in a bill or an invoice that's going to populate with all the rest of this stuff. So we want the item code to be something we can easily remember. So this is going to be AA hourly rate is just the name of it. We don't purchase my time through Xero. We purchase it through payroll, but we do sell my time. So my hourly rate as a pool repair person is $30 an hour. My revenue account for that sale is going to be labor repair revenue, and then my description that is going to go on the invoice, I can make it a little bit nicer. It doesn't have to be a shortcut because this is what's going to auto-populate for us. And I'll save it. But if I have a lot of inventory items or a lot of things that we sell, we might not want to do this one by one. So we can import our inventory items. And if I go to, let me show you what the data file looks like first. Inventory items. It's another CSV file. We have our code here, and then columns for each of the relevant fields. Okay. So let's go ahead and import items. And Xero is adding in 44 items for us from that inventory spreadsheet. So I can see now these are all of the things that we're going to buy and sell for our pool company, along with descriptions and sometimes sales prices. We don't have to have a sales price, but if we do want to, we can have a default sales price that'll auto-populate. In fact, we don't even have to have a real item name. Let me show you what I mean by that. We can create what's called a description only item, where they're not actual inventory items, they're just like macros for things we want to put on the invoice. So if we have, let's say, a 6-month support that comes with an item, I might have a 6MOS. This might be 6 months support. I don't have to put a price or an account, but I can put just a subscription and say this purchase includes 6 months on-site support. And you'll see this in the next hour. We can just use this keystroke shortcut to put this language on an invoice. So it won't even look like an invoice item. It'll just have it'll be like extra language. Okay, let's get over to contacts because we have a few more things we need to cover before we switch over to the next session. So in Xero contacts, the contacts tab, Xero organizes contacts automatically as you buy and sell things. So either from bills and invoices or straight from the bank reconciliation. Xero is going to take that payee or that client or that contact and pull it into the contacts tab and also organize it customer or supplier depending on which way the money goes. So right now we don't have any contacts, so we are going to import some. If you are converting a client over from a QBO file or your QB desktop and you don't want to do the full conversion process. So Xero will help you take a QuickBooks file and convert the entire file into Xero. Sometimes those files are a mess and you don't want to convert the entire thing over. You might want to just cherry pick pieces of the file out, like a chart of accounts, outstanding invoices. You might want to grab your contacts or some of your contacts and start in your new Xero file with them. Again, we can import. So I'm not going to open up the import file because it looks just like the other ones that we've looked at. It's just columns and fields, but I'm going to just grab it, and pull it into Xero using the import button. And this gives us a little bit of some warnings that have to do with tracking categories. Don't worry about that. And now we have 19 contacts uploaded into our file. So we have some customers to play with. All right, what about accounts receivable? So we've pretty much set up the framework of the company. We created our balances as of December 31, but likely have some outstanding invoices from last year as of December 31. So easiest way to get those into Xero is to import them as well. I want to show you what the import file looks like though, because this one is a little bit different. So again, we have columns for fields, right? This is the same. The difference is that in everything else that we've looked at so far, all of our other import files, we've used one row to indicate one thing. So one row for an inventory item, one row for a contact. Invoices is different in that every row is a line on an invoice. And as you know, you can have sometimes lots of lines on an invoice. So every row on this screen is a line in an invoice. The way that Xero decides how to aggregate them is by this invoice number field. So as long as the invoice number is the same, it's going to take all the lines in that, all the rows with that invoice number and put them on the same invoice. So when we're looking at an invoice import file, remember every line, every row is an invoice line, and Xero is going to aggregate them up. So let's go ahead and import those. So under business and sales overview, this is our master sales screen, which we're going to spend a lot more time in the next hour. But just to get this set up so we have stuff to work with, our import button, and again, you've got to download a template file if you need it, browse, and we're going to use the let's get import file, and we're going to pull those in. Complete import. And what Xero is going to do is it's going to pull every invoice into the draft folder. We'll talk about this next time, but next hour, but they're sitting in draft. They're not final yet. The quickest way to go ahead and get them approved over is to click the box at the top left and click approve, and that will finalize those and move them over into the awaiting payment, which is our outstanding invoices section. Let's just look at a couple more invoice settings before we wrap up. Under our org name and settings, I go over to invoice settings. So these are the defaults for invoices we are creating. In Xero, invoices is money coming in, bills is money going out. So this is invoices in. We can look at our default settings, and these are just like if we have due date, if we want to set up a default due date. So I might say all my invoices are due 10 days, not of the following month, but after the invoice date. I could change my invoice numbering if I didn't want somebody to think this is the very first invoice I sent out to them, and so forth. So you can look at these settings. Another really cool option up here is payment services. So if we want to link our Xero invoices to electronic payment options, this is where we do it. Credit cards usually do that through Stripe. Xero's just announced a partnership with Go Cardless for ACH debit. So actually in our firm, in the training company, Elefant, we are looking at putting in ACH debit as an option for especially our bigger training jobs. So this is where we do that setup, is under payment services. And this is my favorite, one of my very favorite features in Xero, Invoice Reminders. So Invoice Reminders are automatic, meaning that if an invoice has not been paid by whatever the schedule is we dictate here, Xero will go and send the client a reminder. That doesn't exist in QBO. QBO will remind the advisor to resend the invoice, but Xero does this automatically. This is awesome. So the way that invoice reminders work is that we turn them on globally. So the default is that it's off, just like this. There are no invoice reminders going out. We turn them on for everybody by clicking this button. So it's like turns on the whole invoice reminder system. And then it's going to give us a calendar that we can dictate what are the thresholds for sending invoice reminders out. So I'm going to pick this first one. I'm going to edit it. What I love about this is that we don't have to wait for the invoice to be overdue. We can have it be underdue. So we can say your invoice is due in 1 day. It hasn't been paid. Don't forget, this is a gentle reminder that your bill is due tomorrow. So I love that. And then I can go in and I can change the due date, reminder thresholds, hurdles, and I can change the language. So if I wanted to, I could have, escalating language as they were later and later. I always include the link to the invoice online because, of course, I want my clients to pay as easily as possible. You can include a link to the PDF. You can also tell Xero, don't bug anybody for certain minimal amounts, and we save it. So we've just turned this on for everybody. But you're probably thinking, I don't want every one of my clients to get these reminders. So what we can do is we can turn them off for specific contacts. So we turn them on for everyone, and then we can go to contacts and turn them off. So I am going to go to my Bushwhacker bar. It's one of our pool clients. And under options, I'm going to turn off invoice reminders. So this specific contact will not get any invoice reminders. I can also go down into the invoice level and turn off reminders. So if I don't want to bug somebody about a specific invoice, like for example, I don't know, maybe there's a dispute on it. So I don't want to bug the client for that specific invoice, but I want to bug them for all the other ones. I can go into a given invoice and turn off reminders under invoice options, turn off reminders just for that one invoice. So you turn them on globally, then you can turn them off either by contact or by a specific invoice. All right, how are we feeling so far? I will see those of you who are continuing on for part 2, which is sales and purchases. Thanks.